We continue our exploration of the string.h library of C. And in this section, we're going to look at string comparison functions. And there are two of them. String compare, str for string, cmp, short for compare. And just like in the previous section, string n compare. So this is another version of string compare. And you can probably guess what this one means as soon as I show you what string compare does. So let me show you the prototypes of these two functions. So string compare takes two arguments, a string s1 and a string s2. And it compares the two strings, whether they're equal or not. If they're equal, this is usually what we're interested in. If they're equal, the string compare function returns an integer, which will be 0 if the two strings are equal. If they're not equal, string compare returns a number that is either less than 0 or greater than 0, but definitely not 0. I'll talk a little bit more about when it returns which number, when it returns a number less than 0, when it returns a number greater than 0. We'll come to that near the end of this section. And just like I mentioned, the string n compare function is an analog to the variants of previous functions, standard I/O functions of the string header library, in which we limit the comparison to up to n, the first n characters. So string n compare takes three arguments, string s1, string s2, and an integer of type size underscore t that is in the prototype denoted by n. The return type of string n compare is the same as for the previous string compare function. It returns a 0 if the two strings up to the first n characters are equal, and it returns a value either less than 0 or greater than 0 if s1 and s2 first n characters are not equal. So, like I said, we're less interested in the cases where the function returns a non-zero value. Usually you use these functions to check if one string is equal to another. Now, the value returned is a negative value, and by negative value I usually mean something like -1. Positive value means something like +1. It returns a negative value if the first string is, and this is interesting, if the first string is less than the second string. It returns a positive value if the first string is greater than the second string. Now, what do we mean by a string being less than or greater than another string? I mean, we are familiar with what it means for one number to be less than or greater than another number, but how does that make sense for strings? So the string n compare function compares up to a specified number of characters, while the string compare function compares the entire strings. String n compare, of course, stops comparing before n characters if it encounters a null character before n characters. And in the following example program, we demonstrate both of these string comparison functions. So we include standard IO and string.h libraries, of course. we define three strings, S1, S2, and S3. Strings S1 and S2, as you can see, are initialized to the same contents, the same string. Happy New Year. Same for S2. Happy New Year. But S3 is initialized to Happy Holidays. So the beginning, the start of it is the same, the word happy, space, but after that, S3 deviates from the contents of strings S1 and S2. So we have two printf statements, and we print a couple of lines of text over here. And what are they? First we'll print out these three strings S1, S2, and S3. So that happens over here in the first printf statement. So we print out S1 is equal to, and then we print out S1. That's these two placeholders. Then we go to the next line. We print out S2 equal to, and then we print out S2. That's what the next two placeholders do. And the same thing for S3 equal to, and then we print out S3. On the third line, that's what these two %s format specifiers do. Then we insert a blank line. We go to the next line, go to the next line. So we leave one blank line. And we print out string compare S1 and S2. So we compare strings S1 and S2. And as you can see over here, those are the two strings that have the same contents. And that is what we print out with this %s format specifier, followed by the value returned by a call to the string compare function, of course. And that is printed out as a 2-digit decimal number. Then we jump to the next line, and we do the same comparison for strings S1 and S3. And we print it out the same way. We print out this string compare S1, S3 equal to, just for us to know what value is being printed out next. And then we print out the actual value returned by the function as a 2-digit decimal number. And then the same thing for a string comparison between S3 and S1. So what values do we expect to see over here? So S1 and S2 are the same, so this should return a 0. When we compare S1 and S3, well, this will return a +1 or a -1 because S1 and S3 are different strings. And then we have a comparison between S3 and S1 that should also return a +1 or -1. Now, let me just jump back. And let's read this again. A negative value if the first string is less than the second string. Okay, so let's see what we mean by less than and greater than. So you know that when you look up a word in a dictionary, words are placed in alphabetical order. You can think of words that appear first as having a smaller value associated with them. And words that appear later down the list, later in the dictionary, are mapped to a larger number. So, in this case, if S1 is a string that should appear first in alphabetical order, and S3 appears later, then this will return a -1. So let's take a look. So happy, happy, happy. So up to that point, they're all the same. The real difference is with this letter over here. Which one comes first, H or N? Well, H. So that makes S3 the smaller string, the smaller value, and makes S1 the larger value. So we expect to see, according to this, we expect to see a +1 because the first string seems to have a greater value. So this one should map to should return a +1, which means the other one, in which we change the order of comparison, the order of the arguments, that one should return a -1. Next, we print out something similar for the use of the string and compare functions. And we compare S1 and S3 up to 6 characters over here. So S1 and S3, that's the first, this, and this string. And we see that up to the first 6 characters, those are both the same strings. So this will return a 0. But then when we compare 1 and 3 up to 7 characters, that includes this column of letters. And then S1 and S3 should return us +1, and S3 to S1 comparison should return a -1. And you can see that's what we see in the output when we run this code. One common mistake usually is that when we deal with logical operations, usually, true maps to 1, false maps to 0. So based on that, you may misremember the meanings of the return values of string comparison and string n comparison, and you may think of the return values as 1 meaning strings are equal, but that's not the case. So remember that when string comparison and string n comparison return 1, it means the strings are actually not equal. So that's a mistake you may make. So this is just a further example explaining what we mean by a string being greater than or less than. So remember, words or strings put in alphabetical order strings appearing later in an alphabetical ordering have larger values. Strings appearing earlier in the alphabetical order have smaller values. And that's what we mean by a string being, one string being greater or less than another. Means if one string goes here in the alphabetical order, the other one goes over here. This one is the larger string, this one is the lesser or smaller string.